Have you ever walked into a buffet thinking, tonight I'm going to beat the restaurant? You pay one fixed price and suddenly an entire table of food is yours. Maybe it's $25. Not bad, right? Then you see the steak and your strategy becomes very simple. Get as much expensive food as possible. Then maybe some sushi because why not? And definitely save room for dessert. You start thinking like a professional buffet warrior. If you eat enough, surely the restaurant loses money. It feels like you're playing a game and you're determined to win. But while you're thinking about winning and getting your money's worth, the restaurant is thinking about something completely different. It's not sitting there calculating exactly how much Peter or any single customer is going to eat. Instead, it's looking at the behavior of every different customer who walks through the door. Some people eat an enormous amount, while others eat surprisingly little during the exact same visit. And that's where the real business model of an all-you-can-eat buffet begins to make sense. One customer might eat enough expensive food to make the restaurant nervous for a moment, but hundreds of customers together create something much more predictable for the business. The restaurant doesn't need to perfectly predict every individual customer who walks through the door. What really matters is understanding the average customer and the average amount they spend. And that's the first thing most Buffett customers never stop to think about when they sit down. Now let's take a closer look at something businesses care about constantly: the actual cost of the food. Restaurants buy ingredients very differently from ordinary customers shopping for dinner at a grocery store. They can order enormous quantities directly from suppliers and negotiate better prices because of their volume. And here's the important part. Not every ingredient on that buffet costs the restaurant anywhere near the same amount. Rice, pasta, potatoes, and other filling foods can cost far less than premium seafood or high-quality cuts of meat. The same basic principle applies when you compare inexpensive pasta with a tray full of premium steak. So a buffet isn't simply a random collection of food that happens to be placed on tables. It's usually a carefully balanced combination of expensive foods, inexpensive foods, filling foods, and visually impressive foods. And when you stand in front of all of it, something very interesting happens inside your brain. You don't see the restaurant's ingredient costs or operating expenses. You simply see an incredible amount of food. You see dozens of different dishes available to you for one single fixed price. And suddenly, that $25 ticket can feel like an unbelievably good deal. That's what we call perceived value, and it's one of the most important ideas in the entire business. Now compare that experience with what normally happens when you sit down at a traditional restaurant. First, a waiter comes over, takes your order, and records exactly what you want to eat. Then someone from the kitchen prepares the food, and another employee eventually brings it directly to your table. After you're finished, someone has to come back again, collect the dirty plates, and clean everything up. At a buffet, however, the customer ends up doing a surprisingly large part of that process by themselves. You simply walk over to the food station, pick up your plate, and serve yourself whatever you want. Then you carry that plate all the way back to your table without needing someone to bring it for you. And when you decide you want another serving, you simply stand up and repeat the entire process again. Now multiply that simple process across hundreds of customers eating at the restaurant throughout the day. Suddenly, the restaurant can serve a very large number of people using a different and potentially more efficient labor model. That's one of the hidden advantages of self-service that most customers barely notice while they're eating. You experience it as freedom and convenience, while the business can experience that same system as operational efficiency. But the most interesting part of the buffet isn't actually the food sitting on the tables around you. It's what the entire buffet experience can do to your perception and the way you make decisions. Think about the psychological difference between ordering individual dishes and paying one fixed price before you start eating. Once you've already paid that fixed price, every additional plate can start feeling almost completely free. And that simple feeling can completely change the way your brain thinks about how much food you should actually consume. Suddenly, your brain isn't asking only one simple question like, "Am I still hungry right now?" Even when you're already getting full, you might look across the room and notice one more tray of expensive steak. And before you know it, you find yourself reaching for another plate even though you probably don't really need it. Because sometimes that decision isn't coming from your stomach at all. It's coming from the way your brain evaluates the deal. You're thinking about getting your money's worth and avoiding the feeling that part of your payment was somehow wasted. Your brain starts calculating perceived value instead of simply listening to the physical signals coming from your stomach. And that's exactly where the psychology behind ordinary consumer behavior becomes surprisingly fascinating. Now take a moment to look at the actual order in which food appears along a typical buffet line. You might encounter bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, or other filling foods before you reach the more expensive dishes. Then, after moving farther along the line, you eventually arrive at the steak, seafood, sushi, and other premium options. By the time you reach those expensive dishes, your plate may already be getting surprisingly full. So when you finally arrive at the premium section, you may not have nearly as much room left in your stomach as you originally expected. And that matters because different foods can have dramatically different costs for the restaurant. The business has to balance those different costs while still making the entire buffet look generous, exciting, and worth the price. And nothing makes a buffet look more generous than seeing an enormous amount of food spread out in front of you. Dozens of dishes, colorful ingredients, and overflowing trays can create the powerful feeling that you're receiving incredible value. And this feeling can happen before you've even taken your first bite or decided what you're actually going to eat. But there's another tiny detail that you might walk past without ever realizing that it can affect your perception. The exact same amount of food can look completely different depending on the size and shape of the plate you're holding. A smaller plate can make a normal portion look surprisingly large and full, even though the actual amount hasn't changed. And it's not just the plates. Even the serving utensils can influence how easily you portion different foods. A large serving spoon makes it incredibly easy to scoop a generous amount of rice or another filling food onto your plate. Meanwhile, smaller tongs can make you naturally pick up premium foods one piece at a time.
Now, this doesn't mean every buffet secretly has a mastermind controlling every spoon and every customer.
But it does show us something important. The environment around you can quietly influence the decisions you make. And then we have another part of the business that customers often don't think about very much: the drinks. Food may be the main attraction, but drinks, desserts, upgrades, and additional options can all contribute to the restaurant's revenue. And these different products can have completely different costs and profit margins from the main buffet food. You might pay one fixed price for unlimited food and then decide to purchase a separate drink while you're sitting at the table. That's why restaurants have to look at the entire customer experience and the entire bill, rather than judging profitability from one plate of food. And sometimes, the restaurant experience introduces another powerful psychological trigger that you've probably encountered somewhere else. Imagine you're already eating when a fresh tray of premium seafood suddenly comes out of the kitchen. Almost immediately, several customers start moving toward it because everyone wants to get some before the tray disappears. And suddenly, you start worrying that if you don't go now, you'll completely miss your chance to try it. That's the basic power of scarcity. Something can feel more valuable simply because you believe you might lose the opportunity. And you've probably seen exactly the same psychological idea being used far outside restaurants in your everyday life. Online stores constantly tell shoppers that only a few products are remaining, even when the real situation may be more complicated. And then there are countdown timers telling you that a discount is about to disappear, pushing you toward a faster emotional decision. But there's one final way to look at your $25 buffet ticket that has nothing to do with how much food you managed to eat. Instead of asking how much food you received, try asking a completely different question. How much of your time did you trade for it? Because money doesn't simply appear in your bank account. You exchange your time, energy, and work for the money you eventually spend. So every dollar you spend represents at least a small portion of your working life and the effort required to earn it. And that doesn't mean you should stop enjoying a $25 buffet or feel guilty every time you spend money on something fun. It simply means that your money has a deeper value than the number printed on the receipt because it represents choices about your limited time. Once you start looking at spending this way, the ordinary buffet experience can suddenly start looking completely different. You begin to see both sides of the equation: the customer trying to maximize value and the restaurant trying to manage its costs. One side is thinking about getting the best possible deal, while the other side is carefully managing averages across hundreds or thousands of customers. And once you understand that principle, you'll start seeing the same basic strategy in supermarkets, airlines, fast food chains, subscriptions, and many other businesses. Businesses don't need every single customer to behave exactly the same way. They simply need the overall numbers to work in their favor. So the next time you see an all-you-can-eat sign, you can still grab that second plate, but now you'll understand the game. You think you're beating the buffet while the buffet is playing the averages. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more simple explanations of the hidden economics behind everyday life. See you in the next one.